Alright, what up dudes? Today I brought you some spooky new characters from Marvel Rivals, fully fleshed out with the best kits that I could come up with just in time for Halloween. What the? Hold on.
Hello?
Yeah, what's up Peter?
I wanted to record a message for you
What do you mean it's November? This is a Halloween video, dude.
to help you get settled in on your first night.
Peter, you only have one job. Okay, it's just one. It's not that hard. Holy shit. Now I'll keep this quick, but as always, if there's a character you want added to my list, feel free to comment them down below, and I'll be sure to get to them as soon as I can. And while you're down there, why not hit that like and that sub button? It's free and it helps out the channel a ton. You can always undo it if you wish. And to sweeten the deal, if you subscribe, you can have a brownie. But with that done, let's get spooky! Now Springtrap was a no-brainer for this. Springtrap has always been one of my favorite horror characters. And FNAF in general, I feel like really hits the mark right as long as they're staying within their niche of spiritual horror and not trying to branch out into this weird sci-fi thing they've been doing. And starting off with his primary fire, we have Knife Slash. Using the same knife that he used to kill most of the children in the original Fazbear's Pizzeria, it's a melee swiping attack that builds up a bleed effect that does a % chunk of the enemy's HP. Moving on to his secondary fire, we have Blade Hurl. This is where he throws his knife into an enemy, and during this time they are highlighted through walls and gain reduced healing. I got this idea from his Dead by Daylight debut. I just didn't want to also give him an axe just for this one ability, so instead I decided to just let him throw the knife. For his first real ability, we have Golden Lure. This is where Springtrap fires a spirit at an enemy, causing them to walk towards Springtrap for a few seconds. I love for there to be some sort of like visual thing going on in the enemy's screen, where it's almost like Glitch Trap, kind of telling the enemy to come here and them listening. For his second ability, we have Fazbear's Fright. This is where Afton lunges forward, grabbing an enemy and screaming into their face, terrifying the enemy and stunning them for a few seconds, making them vulnerable to attacks. This is the same effect that Cloak gives people when his wall goes over them, makes them take more damage. For his third ability, we have Phantom Release. This is where the spirits haunting Afton lash out, hurting him and allowing him to fire souls out wearing masks of various animatronics. In this form, his primary fire changes to a ranged ghostly explosion, kind of a mixture between Thor's Rune Awakening form and Hela's ultimate, and his secondary fire becomes a long-range jump scare from the Phantoms. And this is where I'd want to work in like the FNAF 3 Phantom animatronics, and I'd love for those to actually appear. Obviously this isn't coming to the game, but if it was, I would like to use the physical jump scares from the Phantoms. Onto his passive, we have I Always Come Back. When William dies, he drops to the ground dead for the duration of his respawn timer, and then he can use his left click to get up wherever he died instead of in the spawn room. He gains a brief second or two of immunity, but cannot deal damage during that time. I would like to think that this is cancelable in case you die in a really bad spot. Onto his ultimate ability, we have Help Wanted. This is where Springtrap screams out, summoning half a dozen spirits around him, themed after the Phantom animatronics and other kids that he's murdered, that scare enemies if they get too close to them, and passively float towards William Afton. Scared enemies are forced to use any movement abilities they have to move away from the spirits. Additionally, Springtrap cannot take damage during this time, but for every spirit that gets within range of him, he loses a massive chunk of his HP that cannot be healed back until he dies or the duration ends. Overall, I feel like this ultimate was pretty fitting for him. I liked the kit. It was kind of difficult to make him into a tank character, but I didn't want to just make every single one of these into DPS characters since clearly their whole thing is murdering. But I thought William would fit perfectly into the Vanguard role because he's in an enormous metal bunny suit. And overall, I really like the idea of him becoming completely immune to damage during his ultimate, but then it becomes a kind of CC thing where you want to stun him long enough for one of the spirits to get to him so that they kill him, and so he can stop just pushing up. Because the spirits would like move with him. But yeah, let me know what you think, and let's go on to the next Vanguard.
Is that my Uber?
Now for Hellboy, I really did think about putting him in our DPS role just because of how hard he hits. But then I thought about it more in a lot of his films, at least, because I'm not very familiar with his comics, I will admit. But in a lot of his films, he does tend to take some pretty hefty hits from some very powerful people. So I decided to opt him to be our Vanguard, especially with his right hand of doom being able to block a lot of hits for him as an actual ability. I really just thought he fit the role pretty perfectly the more that I thought about it. So getting straight into it, we have his primary fire, Devil's Revolver. This is a massive revolver. I believe it fires 50 caliber rounds in the actual lore, but this one fires a explosive shot. It's similar to Bucky, how it explodes after it hits someone, but this one pierces through the first target or shield that it hits. So if Strange is holding up a shield, not Magneto because that one absorbs projectiles, but if Strange is holding up a shield and you fire, it'll pierce through the shield and blow up on Strange's face, damaging the shield twice, actually, now that I think about it. So he's really good against shields. Moving on to his secondary fire, we have Right Hand of Doom. This is where Hellboy punches outward, sending enemies flying backwards, dealing extra damage if they hit a wall. And I'd love for this to have a very short cooldown, so if he moves this in right with his other abilities, he can kind of juggle enemies against the wall, but nothing as short as the Thing's right click. For his first real ability, we have Hellhand Block. I contemplated calling this Doomsday's Block, but take whichever one you want. So this is where Hellboy holds his hand up in front of his head, stopping all headshot damage and blocking all incoming damage up to a certain threshold, similar to Captain America's shield. Now during this time, he's actually building up his passive. I still love the name I came up with this, Beelzebruiser. Whenever Hellboy takes damage, he builds up a meter at the center of his screen that increases the power of his right hand of doom. That's his secondary fire, where he knocks people back. When at full charge, it increases both the damage and the length at which enemies are sent flying. Additionally, I'd like to see this give him a slight damage reduction depending on the percentage, just because I didn't give him too many more defensive abilities, so that would help him just regulate his damage a little bit better. For his second ability, we have Devil's Shoulder. This is where Hellboy dashes forward, picking up an enemy on his way forward and knocking them down as they're launched in front of him. So this is kind of a merger between Hulk's pin and Blade's dash. So much like how when Blade dashes forward, he hits an enemy and stops, instead he would go the full distance of the dash, grabbing onto the enemy like Hulk's pin, and when he's done, they would get thrown out in front of him, knocked down. For his third ability, we have Gravedigger. This is where Hellboy hurls a holy relic that impales enemies, causing them to take damage over time. Additionally, while impaled with this relic, they lose access to any supernatural abilities for the duration. Now, I would explain what every supernatural ability is, but it's honestly faster to go over the ones that are unaffected. For example, all of Punisher's kit would be completely unaffected, whereas the entirety of Doctor Strange's kit would be affected, except for the cloak, because that's a different entity technically. So anything that is not a physical item where you pull the trigger or pull the bow back or do something physical to activate it would be negated. Now I'll let you debate in the comments if you think that any mutant abilities or telepathic abilities should not be factored underneath this, since they're technically natural for mutants, but I meant this to be more the magical means, so Doctor Strange's and Scarlet Witch's abilities. Now for his ultimate ability, we have Rightful King. This is where he reaches deep into the earth and pulls out Excalibur, gaining 5 dashes that replace his primary fire. These dashes pin enemies, allowing him to basically steal them or drag them away to wherever he wants. This is basically just multiple uses of his Devil's Shoulder, but during this, they actually take damage over time rather than just the movement. Alright, that was Hellboy. I really like the kit that I came up with for him. I'm not too terribly familiar with his actual comics. I've watched just about every movie that's came out for him. I actually really like the new ones, but or I guess they're not new anymore, but you get my point. But anyway, I like this kit for him. I love that this is a very like hands-on bruiser style kit where you want to use the revolver as a bit of a poking tool, but the rest of your kit really wants you to get up front and personal, and I would not want that to stop you from using a revolver either. So I'd want you to weave in revolver shots with your right hand of doom so you can still deal some pretty decent damage. But let me know if there's anything you'd change, and before we get on to the next one, I just have to ask you one thing.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Is that you, Randy? And what movie is this from? I spit on your garage. Lose the outfit. If Sydney sees it, she'll flip. Oh, you want to play psycho killer? Can I be the helpless victim? Okay, let's see. No, please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
The Scream franchise is easily my favorite horror franchise. I love supernatural stuff, but something so gritty about just a regular guy going around being a serial killer, especially in the world of Scream, where Sidney is an actual intelligent victim, and she actually outsmarts Ghostface and constantly beats him off and constantly beats him back and fights him off. And I just love the movie so much. But getting into his primary fire, I gave him Knife to Meet You. This is where Ghostface slashes his knife through targets, and the final stab slows enemies. For his secondary, we have Silence Slash. This is where Ghostface hurls the dagger into an enemy, cutting off their ability to ping anyone or talk in voice chat. This also slows them, but it can stack with the final stab of his primary fire. For his first real ability, we have Resilient Pursuit. This is where Ghostface has increased speed, becomes immune to stuns from his victim, we'll get to that in a second, and his movement cannot be heard. For his second ability, we have Ring Ring. This is where Ghostface calls an enemy, marking them as his target, or as I would call the condition, victim. For the duration, all of his abilities gain a new effect if used on them. And for his third ability, we have Partners in Crime. This is where Ghostface can mark an ally as your partner. They gain a Ghostface mask on their hip, and during this time, you can hit that button again to turn invisible wherever you're standing, giving you access to 2 abilities while invisible. The first one is Surprise Sidney. This is where you lunge forward, burying the knife in whoever is grabbed, dealing 25% of their maximum HP and healing you for 50% of yours in overshields. If this enemy is your victim, then they also get slowed and take 25% more of their total HP in tick damage, so over time. The second ability you can pick from part while invisible is Like a Ghost, where you can instantly teleport back to your partner and regenerate back to half health. For his passive, we have Partners Forever. Now this is when Ghostface would be eliminated. Instead, he respawns on the ally he marked as his partner with 1 HP. If he is killed by his victim, then he simply becomes invisible and his health refreshes and overshields. Now for his ultimate, we have Who's Behind the Mask. This is where Ghostface cloaks an area around him in shadows, making everyone inside of it look exactly like his character model. Now during this time, friendly fire is active for the enemy team and no one can see outside of the dome. Also, Ghostface's primary fire becomes Surprise Sidney indefinitely while within the dome. Now I really love this ultimate for him, especially because it ties back to the actual whole point of the movie of anyone could wear the mask, anyone can be behind that mask. And also I love it because it can turn the enemy team against each other. And I would also honestly like to see it do the exact same thing to the allies. So you kind of have to play it carefully so that you could even end up killing your own allies. But I also just love the idea of watching Ghostface scream out maximum pulse and then just kill the enemy team and his allies in one action. But with Ghostface finished, I decided to leave our strategists as actual Marvel characters.
But you've earned an object lesson. Vampires are bad for business. Vampires keep souls from flowing to where they're most needed. And with less souls, there are more soulless. Do you understand the lesson? Because it's time for some target practice.
So many targets.
I just see 2 of them.
Now for Mephisto, honestly the hardest part about him was finding something for that little intro bit that you just saw. Because my god, he is not in any media. Like, there's Ironheart, but god, please don't make me watch that again. But getting into his actual strategist kit, and honestly, real quick before I get into it, if you don't think Mephisto is a strategist, I'm sorry, there's something wrong with you. For his primary fire, we have Pitchfork Poke. This is a spear thrust similar to Angela, only faster since it doesn't have a charge up build. It's just his natural primary fire, so it would be significantly faster than hers. Now for his secondary fire, we have Chain of the Pact Bearer. This is where Mephisto's pitchfork detaches in a similar way to how Daredevil's billy clubs detach and turn into those chain thingies. But anyway, they detach and they swing out in an extended arc, so longer than his initial primary fire range. Then he immediately stabs the pitchfork into the ground, applying a chain to all enemies, binding them to the ground. Now, each individual enemy can either shoot the chain or shoot the pitchfork. The chain has significantly less health, but will only free one of them. However, if they shoot the pitchfork, it will break all of them free, but it has significantly more HP. And once one chain is broken, the rest of the chains cannot be. However, the pitchfork can always be broken, but it cannot take damage from someone if their chain is broken. I wanted this to be a kind of interesting dilemma for enemies. Honestly, I feel like this is a little strong for a secondary fire, but at this point, strategists could use a powerful ability that isn't just healing. So I didn't feel bad giving it to him. Also, he is the devil, but in all honesty, I could see this being his ultimate as kind of a mirror to Angela being an angel and him being the devil, even though we literally just had the season for the angel-devil mirror. But either way, I really liked this ability when I came up with it, and I had a better idea for his ultimate, so I decided to leave it as a secondary fire, but let me know any changes you'd make to have it be a little more balanced. Moving on to his first ability, we have Pact of the Damned. This is Mephisto's main strategic element. He has 3 pacts he can make with allies. Depending on the pact that he offers to an ally, they gain a permanent buff, no matter what, but in return, Mephisto gains a percentage of their ultimate charge, constantly. So every time they gain ultimate, they would gain it slower because it's going to Mephisto. The first pact you can choose is Pact of the Blade. This simply just increases the damage of the ally. Then there is Pact of Protection. This grants the ally a bubble that will immediately pop once they fall under 75% of their maximum HP. This bubble will block an indefinite amount of damage for a few seconds, similar to Magneto's. And finally, there is Pact of the Deathless. When an ally dies, instead of respawning at the spawn doors, they will instead respawn at Mephisto. Now, to stop people from using this like how they used Lifeweaver's Grab, I would give it a kind of floating ability like when Adam revives himself, and during that little couple seconds where you're reforming, you can select another ally to dash over to. In a very similar way to Mephisto's next ability, Diablo's Disappearing Act, where you can instantly teleport to an ally who is a pact bearer. Upon entry, you grant them shields, but your previous spot explodes, lighting enemies on fire and leaving the ground aflame. For his final ability, we have Dante's Scorcher. This is where Mephisto breathes out fire in a cone that burns enemies and coats the grounds in fire that can light them up. Now, all of this fire talk is very important because of his passive, Devil's Bargain. This passive allows Mephisto to gain the ult charge that allies would have as long as they have pacts with him. Additionally, when enemies take fire damage, Mephisto and all of his allies regain HP over time. I would honestly like to see this be all allies, whether they have a pact or not, but pact allies gain more healing from it. And now for his ultimate, we have the King of Hell, or Limbo, whichever one. All of your pact holders gain access to all 3 pacts, as well as Mephisto. But during this time, all of your other abilities improve, and Mephisto grows to the size and HP pool of a Vanguard. So Dante's Scorcher would deal more damage and have a much wider arc, and his Disappearing Act I could honestly like to see be used on enemies during this time. And during this time, your secondary fire will also light enemies on fire so long as they are chained. I did think around with the idea of letting all of your fire damage deal double damage for the duration, but honestly, I felt like Mephisto had enough going on as is. So to just be able to improve your flaming abilities, I really liked that idea. I thought that was a much more fun way of giving this ultimate a lot of strategic elements, rather than just being a big circle of healing. Because we know we've seen that way too often from Marvel Rivals. And most of the strategists in Marvel Rivals are very unfun, primarily because they all promote a very heal body-esque playstyle, especially with their primary fires being healing or damage. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't do that with either of my strategists today, or for my future strategist video. Stay tuned for that. But overall, I like this kit from Mephisto. I really like that he isn't just, Luna Snow, who's just gonna heal you the entire time and do all that shit, where it's really give and take with him. And his whole kit revolves around your allies sacrificing some of their ult charge so that you gain it faster. And I wanted his ultimate to be potent, so it made sense to be an ultimate. But since you gain it so fast by having your allies be pact bearers, I didn't want it to be so oppressive he was a must pick. I think I got in that sweet spot a little bit. Let me know what you think. Overall, I'm pretty proud of the kit. Now let's end off the day with possibly the highest grossing film ever known to mankind, which grossed well over $900 more $1 billion.
All our lives we've lived with death hanging over us. Why? Why shouldn't they know what it feels like for a change?
Now, to be fully transparent, it took me the longest time to come up with strategist for this Halloween video, or whatever this ended up being. Mostly because, as you could probably guess, there's not that many horror movie characters that like healing people or keeping them alive. So, instead, I decided to do Dr. Michael Morbius, who is a scientist. So in Marvel Rivals, I don't think it's that big of a stretch to think that he would merge his vampire physiology and his want to help people into kind of one of the same. So I decided to basically make him a supernatural tech character, if that makes sense. It'll make more sense as I describe the kit more, but he has a lot of technology that merges in with his supernatural aspects, and he can kind of help people with that, like the strategist kit that I made for Bruce Banner. If you haven't seen that video, I'd highly recommend it. I absolutely loved making it, and rewriting the Marvel Rivals characters was honestly really fun. But anyway, let's get into his primary fire, Vamp Jutsu. This is a melee combo where he slashes out with his vampire claws, and I'd like to see the final strike be a bite similar to Venom that would give more lifesteal, which is a great segue into his passive, Hungry Healer. Since Michael's #1 problem in the comics is his hunger, and that's like the main point of his character, I wanted to work it into his passive. Every time Michael deals damage, he gains lifesteal. Our other vampire in the game gets that too, no shocker there, but then there's also a meter at the center of his screen that he charges by dealing damage. When at 0, he attacks much faster and gains much more lifesteal, but when it's at 100, you gain a healing buff. So I really wanted it to be his hunger meter. So the hungrier he is, the more savage and feral he is. But the more nourished he is, the more clearly he can think, and the better of an actual healer, strategist, whatever word you want to use, he would be. I would like for this to tick down naturally over time, but I would want it to be really slow, because the main emphasis you would use it in is his secondary fire, Hemographical Regeneration. This is where you fire out a healing pulse that slowly washes over allies in a cone, applying a healing effect instantly, and then an additional one over time, depending on how much charge you use feeding his meter. Depending on how much charge you use from his meter. The way that I see this working is there's an initial pulse that happens every 20 charge, 15 charge, something like that, where that heals a big burst amount, and then the rest of it is just passive uptick, similar to Mantis's healing. And then the ammo reserve is obviously the meter from your passive. For his first real ability, we have Smoke Step. This is where he disappears into a puff of smoke and bats to fly around freely with much faster movement, similar to Angela's natural flight. Now during this time, you leave a trail of smoke that damages enemies and heals allies. This damage to enemies will keep your passive upticked, but this healing will not drag it down. For your second ability, we have Feeding Frenzy. For the duration, you bottom out your passive immediately, and you double the amount of lifesteal you gain from your attacks. Additionally, during this time, your Smoke Step can only be active for a second, but you gain it back much quicker, basically turning it from a mobility use into a quick dash to get more damage off. And for his third ability that was almost his ultimate, we have Mesmerizing Glare. This is a resource-based ability that allows Morbius to glare at enemies and hypnotize them, giving them a charmed condition if they don't look away from you. When charmed, the enemy deals significantly reduced damage to Morbius, but the enemy would basically deal no damage compared to his lifesteal, making it so that you would have to disengage and then come back when it's on cooldown. And now, since we already went over his passive, let's get to his ultimate, Blood Moon Rise. This is where you cause a blood moon to form over your head, and for the duration, all allies within this massive AoE around you gain lifesteal from the damage they deal, and all enemies in the area take a slight damage over time that heals all allies the same amount. Overall, I enjoy Morbius's kit. I think that this makes a lot of sense, and I really love the way that I merged his hunger with his healing, especially in his passive. Overall, I just love him. I think he'd make for a great strategist. And I thought about some cool cosmetics, might be like a Dracula skin, since I don't think we'd ever get Dracula as a character. And I'd love an emote similar to Emma Frost's Making It Rain emote, where he just throws out like a more $1 billion to make fun of the movie. I'd love it so much. All right, now just for fun, I did make some team ups for all of these characters, even for the horror franchise one. And I thought it would be kind of cute to see how they'd interact if they were actually put into the game. So starting back with Springtrap, we have the Bite of 87. This is where Springtrap anchors and Venom gains a new ability where he can bite down on an enemy and gain overshields from the damage. And Jeff gains a knife that he can shoot out instead of a secondary fire, applying the same bleed effect that is on Springtrap's primary fire. Now for Hellboy, this team up actually comes from me and my friend. Technically, it was going to be called Liberty Bell back whenever it was just I wanted it to be added to Marvel Rivals, but to work Hellboy into there, I decided to call it Hell's Bells. This is where Captain America anchors, and similar to his current team up with Bucky, he gains a confirmation ability with Hellboy and Thor, where they can either throw or shoot Cap's shield, or they can choose to slam into it if they wish, and have it ring out, damaging all enemies in AoE. Thor's AoE applies Lightning Realm in the area, but Hellboy applies Gravedigger to all enemies in the area. I thought that would be an interesting way to do it because I loved that scene whenever Captain America and Thor have teamed up, especially in the first Avengers movie when Thor slams down onto him and they eliminate all those trees that were around them. And then how Captain America kind of does it on his own whenever he throws the shield and then throws Mjolnir into the shield. And Brandon always called that the Liberty Bell, so I wanted to give him the credit here. Now getting into Ghostface's team up, I thought it was only fitting to give him Bloody Tricksters, where Ghostface can now teleport to Loki's clones while invisible, and Loki can actually see behind the mask in Ghostface's ultimate. However, if he wishes to, he can still attack allies, and his backstab passive is quadrupled during this time, because my god, does he need that normally. Now Mephisto's passive is Mephisto's team up would never happen in the actual lore, but within Marvel Rivals, I would love to see a death match made in hell. This is where Mephisto anchors, and Magic can activate an ability to light her sword on fire, and all of her sword attacks deal damage over time, lighting them on fire. So that would be her primary fire, I wouldn't say her secondary fire since that's a launching attack, but maybe, and then her big AoE spin move. And Hela can do the exact same thing with her primary and secondary fires. Now for Morbius, I decided for his team up, it should be the best medicine, Magic, where Morbius and Doctor Strange team up. Morbius gains a new ability that allows him to charge his claws with magic, allowing him to launch the attack up to 30 feet, and Doctor Strange anchors, but that doesn't really give him anything, so I decided to also give him, while he's under the effect of his anti-heal, he will actually gain lifesteal from all the damage he deals. It's not much, but it's something that would allow him to keep up, especially if it was a newer player learning them. Alright y'all, that's pretty much all of the video, but real quick, I wanted to just take a second to talk about who I think could actually have costumes like this in Marvel Rivals. For a Springtrap costume in Marvel Rivals, I would honestly love to see Venom have it. I know it doesn't really make sense, but I think it would be really cool to see Venom kind of become the suit and then have Eddie be William underneath it. I think that would be really cool. Not to mention Bite of 87, Venom's kind of known for biting people's heads off. Now for Hellboy, I would love to see Bucky get a skin for Hellboy. He already has the Hand of Doom. Actually, is it? I think it's his right hand that's metal, actually. I could be wrong about that. But if it is, it fits even better because right hand of Doom. But for Ghostface, obviously Loki, I don't think anyone else would fit Ghostface better. And then Mephisto and Morbius are actual Marvel characters, so I couldn't see them being skins. But anyways, thank you all for listening to that little tangent at the end. That is where I'm going to call this video. I hope you all enjoyed. I had so much fun making this, and stay tuned because I've got a Christmas special coming up too. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know who you want in the Christmas special, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.